Hey y'all, and welcome to my channel. If you watched my fall runway fashion video, then you might remember these garments. And while it's not something that I would normally wear, I thought it might be fun to see if I could recreate something. It seemed pretty simple, maybe like a blanket and a scarf kind of sewn into a jacket or a cardigan. So let's see how it turns out. Let's get started. All right, so I finally found a shirt or a jacket, cardigan, whatever, hoodie that I wanted to use. It's just a navy kind of sweatshirt. It's got some cool snaps down it. Got the hood at the top, some pockets. And then I found this scarf. It's a pretty lightweight weave, so we'll see how that works out. But I liked the hot pink in there and stuff. So I've gone ahead and unpicked one of my side seams. This, because it has this knit binding at the bottom, I'm actually just going to have to cut through that. And I unpicked it a little over halfway. My thing is, I don't want the scarf to stop right at like my waist, I don't think, or even at my hips, because I feel like if it starts there, it's going to make me look extra hippie. So I'm thinking it needs to start a little bit higher than my waist, maybe. I mean, I don't know that it's technically supposed to be flattering to the figure. I don't know. So in trying to figure out exactly how to lay this out, sometimes I have to draw little diagrams and things. So here's what I did. I have a piece of paper that's going to work for, let me put it on here so it'll show up. So a piece of paper here, this is for my scarf. And then I cut out basically half a shirt. So there's my little armhole, here's a thing. And then I just taped it, basically my side seam, I taped it where this part of the seam is that I didn't unpick. So that would be the rest of the seam that's open. Now, sometimes I have to do this, this is the way my brain works. So in the inspiration photo, there was part of the scarf, let's call it, or blanket, whatever, part of the alternate fabric that hung down below the end of the hoodie, let's say. And then it was some of the inspiration photos, you did see a little bit of the scarf on like the zipper or the buttons up the front. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to have it show. So I'm just going to butt that up there. So there is it hanging down below the scarf on that side. I'm just going to stick a pin there. Okay. And then here's my side seam that I've opened up. So if you pull that all the way back like that, here's the scarf that hangs down equal amount on the back side. So then it looks kind of like that. Here's, for all intents and purposes, the back, the scarf hanging down in the front. So when you when you're wearing it like this, then obviously the scarf would hang off, would look like that. But because it's a lightweight, it's going to fall and kind of hang down like that, if that makes sense. Now the amount that it's going to hang down here on the sides is going to be contingent on how wide this is. So if I didn't want it to hang down as much, I could have less coming off there, and it wouldn't hang down as much. So I hope that diagram per se kind of shows you how I am going to lay out my hoodie on my scarf. so here's my scarf. Now the scarf I'm using, I picked it up at a thrift store for, it was like $1. It's about 26 inches wide and about 75 inches long, which is plenty for what I'm going to need it for. Obviously, the length and width and stuff, that's going to be dependent too on, you know, what the length and width that you need. So for here, since I've already unpicked my side seam, I'm just going to very carefully cut that in half. Okay, so now per my diagram, here is, just like here is my garment front with what I want hanging down below. So I need to decide how much fabric I want hanging down below my hoodie. And then remember, I'm going to have them even here along the edge. So I think I'm going to hang it down. I'm going to do it about like that. So that is, where's my ruler? It's about 7 inches that's going to hang down below. Okay. Now again, for right now, I'm just going to kind of pin in place just to kind of hold everything. And then I can go back and kind of adjust, even up, make stuff straight, all of that. Okay, so because on mine, this is only, this is 11 inches wide here, which means there's this long, 15 inches, that's going to hang off. So which means on mine, there's 15 inches here. Don't know whether that's going to be too much yet. I'll wait and see after it's pinned. Okay, so I've got a couple pins here holding this in place. Now obviously this is going to be too long, but that's okay because I have to do the same thing on the other side. So you're basically, your scarf has to be long enough that you can do this twice, because you have, obviously you have another side, because you just don't wear half of a cardigan. So however long this is, it's got to be that long, which I think, you know, 75-inch scarf should be enough. Again, that's going to depend on, like, if you had a really long cardigan, like something that hung down to your, you know, like your thighs, below the knee, then you might have to have 2 scarves in order to get enough length. Now, here's something to take in consideration too, because this is obviously not cut up in the back's not cut up the center. This is only going to go halfway in the back. So the other direction is going to meet it. Now, there is a way, it's a lot more complicated. There is a way that you can actually cut it right here at the center seam it together, and then you could end up with one full piece across. And I don't know that I want to get that technical right now, so we'll see. All right, so I'm just going to take it. So this one here ends, this is why stripes are good. I'm going to have it on the green stripe. It ends almost directly on this blue stripe, which means that this side here needs to end in about the same place. So it needs to end about right there. So it's about the same width on both sides. And then this should be straight. You pull this down so that it's straight, or as straight as you can. And you can either end up sewing this right sides together, or you can sew it wrong side to right side and just top stitch it. Just depends on how comfortable you are with this. In the scheme of things, if you decide to just pin it and leave it like this and then top stitch it, right side or right side to wrong side, you really, if you use matching thread, you're really not going to see it. All right, and then this one should come around like that. Oh, and of course, as soon as I start filming, Twix wants to be in the sewing room, which he hasn't been in here all day. So yes, now that Twix is in the sewing room and comfy on his blanket, I can continue. Okay, so now that I've got it all pinned, this is what it's going to look like. Let me see if I can fold this extra back so that, whoops, you get more of a, you can see more of what it's going to look like. Okay, so all right, so half, so it's going to hang down about the 7 inches there. And then this, and this is why I think definitely scarves are like lightweight blankets, because they're going to hang more on the side here. If you get something really heavy, it's not going to hang as much. But then that's going to hang down like that, essentially. It's never going to look as good when it's just pinned. But I do have enough, it is long enough to do both sides. So what I'm going to do before I go and pin it is I am going to make sure that I'm going to have enough to put on both sides. I'm going to make it a hair longer just in case. So, and it has this little fringe on it, which I can do. So I'm just going to cut it there. Cut it. Essentially now I'm just cutting this in half. And I can go do my other side, which I need to unpick. I haven't unpicked it yet. But then I'm going to pin my other side the exact same way. Now, because this is how my brain works, my brain gets technical. I'm not going to be able to do it because the scarf's not long enough, but in my technical brain, I would want the stripes to match. So I would want, well, let me find it here. Nope, that's the back. Here's the front. I would look at it so that when you're wearing the garment and, you know, when you're wearing the garment, I would want the stripes to actually match. That's me. I have a thing for stripes. This is one of those plaids that's an uneven plaid, meaning that it looks different from different directions. It's not symmetrical. So you see here, the blue's on the right side, the blue's on the left side. But if you, so I have to turn it. Now it's right. So in order to do this, if I want it to match, I'd actually have to start it here, and I'd lose that much, which is possible as long as it's long enough, because I'm losing almost 2 inches there. So what I'm going to do then is say I'm going to start there. And the reason you don't see the red and the blue line here is because when you fringe it, you're going to pull those out. But if I'm going to start it there, then I'm going to just measure it and make sure that I have enough in the length. So I'm just going to hold it up to this piece, starting where my pin is. And unfortunately, I do not. I'm that much short, which means that I used over half the length. It's not gonna, which I guess I should have measured it, cut it in half before I did this, because all that means is I can't have 7 inches going down from here, I have to have less. And I could have had less if I had measured it and cut it in half first and then just used the piece that was cut in half. I can still do it, but I'm going to have to unpin the first one, put them together, cut them evenly, and then pin them back up, basically matching the center of the scarf to the center point here on the underarm seam, and then pinning out, and then just making sure that there's the same amount on both sides. So now that I've confused everyone and myself, because sometimes I just go for it and I don't measure first, cut second, measure twice, cut once. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, so I pin these together where they would normally be, there and there, and yeah, it only leaves me with that much instead of the 7 inches. I found the center, pinned it there. So now, but I have, you know, all this left over after, you know, a couple sips of coffee and sitting here making this a lot harder than it needs to be. So I've got this left over, and I'm thinking, how can I, instead of, you know, because I had said in the back of the garment, you would have to have a seam because it's all one piece. How can I do it where I can take the whole piece, maybe this strip here, and sew it underneath to the back of the garment so it's all one piece? So now I'm going to ponder that, do a little pinning, and we'll see. Now, you know, the whole, I can't go buy another scarf because I thrifted it, and the whole, you know, measure twice, cut once, yeah, I'd recommend that. Oh, and Twix, the chub, has moved to the sewing chair. So, yeah, there's that too. Okay, so I've evened it all, pinned it all. I'm sure there's probably a way to seam it basically back at the center point under the arm to get a full piece that goes all the way across. I don't have enough scarf to do that. So I'm going to leave it with the seam up the back. I think once I sew it, especially since it's kind of, you know, it's going to be matched, I don't think it's going to be that noticeable. So I've got it done here so that the stripes match. That's how much, what, 2.5, 3 inches that I've got there. So, and then I've got pretty much the same amount here on this side, so I'll have to cut that one off there and then put the little, do the little strings on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and cut those off so that they're the same length. I've got everything pinned, making sure that both my fronts here match on the stripe, that this corner matches on the same stripe as the back corner there, same with this one. So, and then I'm actually going to attempt to try this on, which I think it'll work, because once it's sewn, I'm going to go back and cut all of this underneath off, because you don't need all this scarf that's under your cardigan. I'll show you that later. So I'm going to go ahead and just cut. I'm not going to pull the strings out right now. I'm just going to cut it off right now. Try it on. Make sure that I like how this length here, how that flows, and make sure I like where I stop this. You can always sew it back together if you feel it's too high, unpick it a little bit more. Again, cut this off so that there's not quite as much hanging down. So those are all adjustments we can make. And then from there, it's a matter of just sewing it around. So let me try it on, see how it looks, and then we'll go from there. All right, so I've got everything cut. I've got it pinned right where I want it. Now, because this has this stretchy ribbing at the bottom, it stretches inward like that, you can see. So when I sew it, I'm going to have to make sure to stretch it flat, which brings me to point number 2. I think on this, instead of sewing like right across the base here, I'm actually going to sew right here where the shirt and the ribbing joins. I'm still going to have to stretch it flat like that to sew it, but that way it'll hang down below that, but I don't have to worry about compromising the stretch on that. And then I will just sew up this little part here. I am just going to top stitch it. I'm not going to try to do, you know, any kind of right sides together stuff. I'm just going to get some navy thread, just top stitch it all the way around. Again, I've got it all nicely pinned here on the side. The front, the same thing. I'm going to have to stretch it a little bit, and I'm going to sew it across here. And then I'm going to just sew it straight across through this ribbing here. Now, I went ahead and cut these so that they're even. So once I finish sewing everything, then I just need to basically make the fringe. Now, this is something, I remember doing this to like napkins and stuff back when I was a kid. And it's such a thin, lightweight material, and the weave is so big, this is super easy. But you just basically take the threads and just pull them out. Now, if you want to, you can sew a stitch so to keep the threads from keep the threads from coming out in any more. But you'll see I'm just pulling the threads, pulling them out. They come out super easy. Just do 1 or 2 threads at a time and just go all the way down to the end, and they'll come right out. And I'm just going to do that until the fringe matches on both sides. So I am going to go ahead and top stitch my whole thing down. I am going to pull out my threads to make my fringe, and then I will show you, I will flip it over and I'll show you how to cut it out on the inside. All right, so I am done sewing it. I sewed straight across here and then all the way down to here. As you can see, I did not sew down here because it bounced back. Sewed across there all the way back up. So now we go into the problem, what do we do with all this extra that's on the inside of the garment? We're just going to cut it away. Now, I know it may be hard to see on the camera, but you've got your stitching line from the front all the way down the side and then all the way across to the back. So we're just going to cut that off. I'm going to cut it, I'm going to leave maybe about 3/8 of an inch or so. Be very careful not to cut the hoodie, just cut the scarf. But you're just going to cut that away, and you're left with the edging, just the scarf showing at the edging piece. Now, you can definitely keep, you know, any extra of the scarf that you have here. Use it for another project. You know, you probably would have, you know, big enough squares here that you could make a pillow or a purse, or, you know, add it to another upcycle or something like that. So, and you'll see there, I'm just cutting it away. It does not affect how it looks on the outside. But you just don't need that extra on the inside. So I'm going to finish cutting this, and then we'll see how it turns out, how it looks.
So I think it turned out pretty similar to the inspirations that I was going for. Not really my style, but hey, I gave it a try, and I hope this inspires y'all to think outside the box, try something new, and happy sewing.